My name is Dimitri Markelov, aka @DimitriMakeLove, and you're listening to an episode of Faucets of Reality. Let's begin.
I'll let you lead with...
Sure. Yeah, well, going back to something you said, which is that art and symbols are one of the most powerful ways to communicate. It is something that's cross-cultural. As soon as someone sees an image, when there's no text or anything associated with it, that is having an impact. And if it's a powerful and well-constructed image, someone is able to see it and feel that emotional impact.
Wow.
And so when you're talking too about there being a shared field of experience, it really, this informs the entheogenic space and like ceremonies, because as emotions are rising, whether it's from one participant or in the group, that is coming up into the space. And the facilitator should be trying to manage that feeling and being able to find in themselves where that emotional space is and be able to hold that.
Wow. Okay. So basically, it's definitely an interesting, facet of reality is symbols, on how, our letters are basically symbols, And I've heard it put the way you draw the lines, is kind of how you literally direct conscious energy that way. Like the energy that everything is built with, all the whole reality is built on these, you could say, channels of energy, of, connecting and things like that. And so, yeah, it's interesting to me, how, there's sigils, for example, right? I'm sure you've heard of that, where different symbols will represent different things. It's kind of like, it's part of the thinking is the like allegory or like, symbolism, basically, that this image represents something bigger, something like an experience, or how there's in astrology, there's like the symbol for the sun,
Right, and a sigil often having like whole words or other symbols, letters, incorporated into sort of put together, so it's one concise image. And so that one concise image has all this intention. Let's say a whole sentence of I am powerful and I deserve good things. You can create a sigil of that using like maybe the first letter of each of those words, creating that sigil, and then that symbol carries that energy behind it.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know how to make sigils. Then people talk about sigils sometimes, but they don't know how to make them. And yeah, it's there's a whole process to it, right? Where you write out like an intention, and then people do it differently. But sometimes you'll take the vowels out, or you'll take repeating letters out, and then you're just left with like a handful of letters, and then you'll rearrange them into like this one symbol that has the intention behind it. And I've also heard I've heard that like a big part of that is to forget what you intended, to forget about it, kind of like throw it out. Like the more you can forget about it, the more powerful that symbol becomes, if that makes sense. So yeah, again, working with the conscious and the unconscious, we only have so much bandwidth in our consciousness, so to speak.
Stan Grof, who had created holotropic breathwork and then was doing a lot of LSD therapy sessions. He had this idea that our consciousness is just tuning into different frequencies, different bandwidths. Essentially, like on a radio, we're changing stations, and so when we're in these entheogenic states, we're just changing the dial a little bit and getting a different frequency that's usually not coming through.
I love it. Yes, like a radio is such a good way to put it. In general, these technologies that we have now, even with like video and things like that, they're based off of an actual experience we had, like, of even video being like kind of our eyes, you know what I mean? Or radio is an interesting one, basically saying that there's this invisible network of waves, and we can pick them up like receivers. and that there's this greater reality. That's literally what radios allude to, right? And our phones now, with internet and everything, they're picking up these invisible waves that we cannot see with our eyes. We can't touch them, but they're there. And
the phone can hold a symbol on it, like an image, and you can destroy the phone, but it's still existing on the internet in the same way too. And I think this really speaks to what Bufo is incredible at, is you can destroy the phone, but you're not destroying the source of the signal, in the same way that a person may die, but there's a remembrance of what we're coming from with Bufo. So oftentimes when folks are having these particularly Bufo experiences, there is a witnessing and a returning back to this source, back to this sense of wholeness, a homecoming to something that we are missing in ourselves as individuals, yearning for, not even knowing we're looking for it. And once we have this experience and we're coming out of it, there is a deep remembering of what this is and who we are and what we are.
And the inherent unity in reality, that we are all together, even though we might be, we might take on this individual kind of experience of being separated from everything, in order to come back and to create our own connection back to, source, or whatever you want to call it, that all is one, and for the listeners, Bufo is the frog medicine. It's actually a poison, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So Bufo, or Bufo alvarius, is what it was the toad's name for a long time, and recently rebranded into Encilius alvarius. But the common name for it's Bufo, is a toad that comes from the northwestern portion of Mexico, the Sonoran Desert, and it also extends into southern Arizona, New Mexico, California.
Really? Okay.
And so this toad hibernates underground for about 9 months of the year.
Wow.
And it emerges for a very brief rainy period to hunt, mate, and it has a defense, which are these glands on its neck and arms and legs, which contain its defense, a secretion, a poison, which has a number of peptides in it, but namely it has bufonatine and 5-MeO-DMT.
Wow.
And 5-MeO-DMT is experientially very different from DMT. So when folks tend to talk about having a DMT experience, almost always this is NN-DMT, just straight dimethyltryptamine. And they're similar in that they come on very quickly. They're generally vaporized, and they're in the tryptamine family. And so 5-MeO-DMT contains the whole molecule of DMT, but it has this extra methyl group. And so DMT is a very visionary experience. People oftentimes talk about incredible geometry, going to other realms, meeting beings and entities.
Yeah.
And it's a very short-lived experience. And there are certainly really powerful ways to work with it. Like, it's the active ingredient in ayahuasca, for example. Yeah, but when people are having just DMT experiences, they're oftentimes referring to this vaporized, very quick 15-minute
experience where you meet the machine elves, right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And Bufo doesn't so much have machine elves.
Okay.
Bufo is very much a feeling-oriented medicine. So what this extra methyl group does is it really helps target the default mode network and has an incredible ability at greatly reducing the ego filter. And so folks very quickly, even while they're still inhaling, are almost at the peak of their experience. And once this ego filter reduces almost down to zero, they're able to have this remembering, this homecoming back onto something larger than themselves.
Wow.
And so, like we were mentioning before, oftentimes our ego has a agenda of not feeling all of the incredibly tough things to feel, because it'd be very hard to navigate the day-to-day life if we're constantly in dysregulated states. And so Bufo provides this opening that happens like any other psychedelic, but Bufo does it incredibly powerfully and a bit all at once. And so once our ego filter reduces down to essentially zero, those interrupted fight or flight patterns can emerge. And so people can have incredibly cathartic experiences, which can look like shaking, crying, rolling around, just vibrating, really deep guttural vocalizations. And you can just feel that it's pure feeling, pure authentic life force that's coming through.
Pure expression.
Pure expression, yeah. 5-MeO is incredibly powerful and absolutely requires an experienced facilitator to be a part of it. People are entirely unaware of the 3D environment around them, and for about 10 to 15 minutes. And so when those deep-seated patterns are coming up, someone could even be thrashing around and having essentially no conscious control of their limbs. And it is the peaks of all human expression, the peaks of all human emotion can come out during a Bufo process, which is incredibly, incredibly powerful and clearing. It is truly unlike a lot of other entheogens, because there's not so much visionary content connected to it. Like an ayahuasca experience, people may go to all these realms, they may meet beings or ancestors that really help them move through a lot of content in a deeply, deeply healing way. And Bufo is generally devoid of this content. Oftentimes people describe this as a single white light or an effervescent just presence. There's more of a deep knowing in one's own being when they have this unity experience. And it also is, like I was mentioning before, also a very physical experience, because you're having all this energy move through the nervous system and get released. And so people can purge on Bufo as well. And so if you're entirely unaware of the environment around you, someone could possibly be on their back and asphyxiate. So that's why it's so important to have folks who are understanding of what the presentations of Bufo could look like.
Okay. So I would imagine afterwards you feel light as a feather, right? After you've released all those emotions, those feelings that you've been kind of holding on to. Once you purge them, right, it's that is the healing in a way, right? You become lighter, and like you said, so they see a white light. That reminds me of, I don't know if it was a book or a podcast that I saw or that I heard, that they were talking about. It was a medical practitioner who basically he had to witness a lot of people passing on, dying, and then a lot of some of them would actually come back, and that they all kind of describe the same thing that happened to them, where it's there was just this light, it's just this white light, and that that it was just uncanny how they all had a very similar experience, and a lot of them, they wanted to come back, they wanted more life, so is that kind of I know a lot of the Egyptian mystery schools were based around what happens after you die, and it's kind of preparing yourself for that experience, where they would there was, I think, 9 or 12 gates they had to pass through, things like that. And so is that kind of like that? Well, so Bufo, did you say how is it ingested? Do you smoke it, or?
Yeah.
I've also heard that you burn it onto your skin, or is that Bufo also?
So
okay.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that a lot of cultures have different maps of the unconscious and maps of dying. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead, right, is going through all these different bardos, or these different levels of reality and disillusion, is this process. And so Timothy Leary had taken the Book of the Dead and adapted that into a LSD sort of manual, and using that as a way to navigate it, because with these entheogens, there is this deprogramming or stripping away of beliefs, regular sense of self, and coming into a pure awareness that we are just consciousness. So Bufo is generally vaporized. You don't need terribly much of it, and it's very humbling that such a small quantity of a secretion from a toad can create very, very reliably this what seems like a near-death experience.
Experience.
It's all entheogens can do this. But Bufo is really reliable in creating this dissolving of the ego and deliverance onto something that is, people describe very similarly as this one source, this one emanation of truth, this one emanation of reality in which all life is forming up from.
Right. Wow.
You had mentioned the burning of the skin.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a different medicine that's also coming from an amphibian, which is called Kambo.
Kambo.
Mhm.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to get those confused.
No. Yeah, they're good friends. They actually work in tandem pretty well.
Really?
So,
Okay.
And not all practitioners do so, but Kambo can oftentimes be given to someone to clear them out, right? These very light burns are made on the skin. That dead layer of skin is wiped away. It feels like a bee sting. And then the secretion from this frog is applied to it. And pretty quickly, within a few minutes, someone starts to, their body heats up a lot. It's not an entheogenic experience, but it can bring about really, really big purging. And so this can help clear people physically. It's like a really good soul scrub.
Soul scrub.
It has the unofficial title of the jungle vaccine as well. So like when people get sick or they become sick with something, if you take a Kambo, you can really help purge it out.
Really?
So recently I was recovering from an illness, and I had given myself Kambo, and it seemed to really help.
Cool.
Just like a regular cold, and it really seems to help. But the idea is that the more density you're able to clear yourself out of those larger patterns that are held in your system, you can sort of break those patterns up with the Kambo. And then if you administer an entheogen this time, like ayahuasca or Bufo, then that plant spirit and animal spirit can go deeper into your own being and do more deep clearing and not get so hung up on these more surface level patterns.
Very cool. Wow. That's quite a science behind it. And, speaking of science, I like how we touched on these different, layers of reality. That's something I'm very interested in. How the, Tibetan Book of the Dead, you said Timothy Leary, basically mapped out, the levels of consciousness? Or?
Yeah, going off of the Book of the Dead, he then translated that onto the LSD experience, essentially. Yeah,
so I guess, it reminds me also of Plato's, I think it's called Animus Mundi, which I think I've talked about before here on Faucets of Reality, which is basically, it's a book where he basically traverses all the different layers that the soul, has to go through to get into our body. And each one of them is based on a planet, so they have like a Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, what have you, Venus, all of them.
Yeah.
And then it also makes me think of the chakras as kind of being these levels of, you could say, dimensions.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just, this is something that's very interesting to me, and I've kind of, I've looked into this a lot, how basically we, in our everyday, we only exist on maybe, 2 or 3 dimensions. We can only see, like the physical, I think it is, the emotional, and like the mental, maybe the mental, hopefully,
Hopefully, yeah.
I mean, a lot of people seems to me like they're operating mostly from that emotional level, which is, which is important. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just that reality is built one on top of the other kind of thing, So how many of these dimensions do you think there are? How what is our potential of how many of them can we actually reach or experience?
So I think there is an unlimited number of possible frequencies we can tune into. There are certainly a lot of worldviews that try to attribute different numbers to all of these things. And it's definitely very useful to have maps maps can help orient and can help give you language to phenomena when they occur. It's like using the chakra system of being like, okay, well, I'm rooted into sense of safety and groundedness with my roots, and when I come all the way up to the throat, that's in ways of communicating with people around me.
Yes.
And there's others that are honoring emotion. There's others that are honoring more effervescent things.
The
like
heart also. Oh, sorry, the effervescent things.
of like intuition, but yes, and then heart being like true connection to self, true connection to other beings. Yeah.
Oneness.
Yes, and so I think these maps can be very helpful, but they're certainly limited, and every culture is going to be highlighting different aspects of these maps because maybe they have more experience around that.
Okay.
And that is something really incredible is this gentleman, Ken Wilber, had brought together many maps of reality. So he was drawing from folks in Western psychology, including folks going all the way back to like Plato and Aristotle, as well as like more recent psychology like Freud, Jung, Gestalt, Wilhelm Reich. And then he was also bringing different Eastern practices of like the Hindi and Buddhist ways of being, Jainist ways of being.
Yeah.
There's like many different ways of mapping the psyche.
Okay.
And he created these more centralized maps that were incorporating all of these different ways of being in a much more
Oh my goodness.
concise way.
Brought them all together, kind of like found parallels between them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he found the underlying structures between them, and there being different fulcrums, different like I'll say depths to each of those ways of being. And so he found that Western culture focused very much on what he would call the upper left quadrant, which is the individual, like I, me.
Yes.
And this being something that like Piaget's developmental stages of child development. Going from like concrete operational and going up from those sort of stages of development, being really, really good at that and really fine-tuned to that ego construction and that organism construction. But Western maps of consciousness oftentimes got up to like, oh, well, like the top of Maslow's hierarchy is like individuation. Like once you realize who you are and what your purpose is, you're good. But a lot of what these other Eastern maps have are these
beyond that.
Yeah, they focus a little bit more on these more subtle realms, not as much on the individual development as much as transpersonal themes. And so actually later in Maslow's life, he added a triangle on top of the other triangle, like an inverted triangle sitting on top of it, because in a lot of Eastern traditions, there's an infinite ladder of wellness. We can just go deeper and deeper into a evolution. Like our person can be constructed and solid, and that's good because we have a good solid ego to function in the world and show up in the relationships, fulfill our dharma. And then beyond that, there are more subtle ways of being well, which is being more in tune with your energy systems, being in tune with your ancestors, in tune with environmental conditions like the plants and animals and land around us, as well as more collective themes of like archetypes, deities, etc.
Right.
Yeah, these yogic trances and yogic ways of being that are talked about really well in like Hindi philosophy.
Right. Wow. That is just outstanding knowledge you have there. I've heard of Maslow before. I didn't know he added like interpersonal, so it's like past yourself, I guess more like on a societal level or something like that. So these maps of consciousness in a way, yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand they help, but on the other hand, consciousness is so infinite that you can't really ever limit it to any like specific number of things. But there is definitely certain parallels and certain common threads throughout all the different, you could say, religions or spiritualities or maps of consciousness. There does seem to be this underlying unity, and this is one way to explore it, to have some understanding, even maybe if just for the ego to kind of find their way, your way around. So like for me, it's very interesting how the chakras all correspond to like a color, you know. How, you know, the root chakra is red, then you have the sacral, which is orange, then you have the solar plexus, which is yellow, or the sun, you know, and the heart chakra is green, throat chakra is blue, and the third eye is indigo, and then you have violet for the crown chakra. And then apparently there's 5 other chakras above that also. We actually have 12 chakras, and they correspond to the chromosomes of the DNA. We were originally, the template was to have 12 of them, from my understanding. And to me, it's always been interesting, just like as a philosopher, to find the common thread between light and sound. You know, that's something that I kind of, you know, put in a lot of thought, just like, you know, we are in this one reality, but on one level, you're seeing things, right? You're using your eyes. It's like your first kind of, you know, everything's changing all the time. But on another level, you're hearing things. And so where do they connect, you know? Have you ever thought about that? Like, how are they similar?
Yeah, well, this goes back to this sense that there's phenomena existing and that we are filtering reality in a particular way. Because, for example, a vibration that's happening, let's say you have a speaker underneath some water, we can hear it, but we can also then see those vibrations.
Right.
We can feel those vibrations. And so we just have these particular ways of picking up on information, right? It's like, yeah, we have an eye to process it, and the eye picks up the phenomena, and then our brain is wired in a particular way to make sense of it, in the same way that hearing, we're just making sense of it in a very particular way. But you could also incorporate and decipher that information as vibration. As physical, tactile vibration. Yeah.
Totally. So, I mean, would it be safe to say that like our eye picks up finer vibrations, then maybe the sound is like more gross, right? And then you have like obviously tactile, like, you know, you feel vibration in your body also. But they're all kind of the same thing in a way. Like the chakras, they correspond to colors, but they also correspond to notes on the piano or like a musical scale. You know, there's this kind of, again, like shared system of all this stuff has already been mapped out by all these, you know, all these traditions. Like it's all there. But then you can rearrange it in infinite ways, you know. So like a chord, you know, on the guitar will have like certain notes being played at once, and they will create harmonies with each other, and they will sound good, and they'll create something even you know, bigger maybe, or even more complex, you know. So I guess to me it's interesting to get to that like basic level of reality, you know. I mean, that's my whole podcast is about exploring reality, what all this is, you know. So I'm so happy we're getting into actually a systematic way of looking at these things, you know. And as a facilitator, I would imagine you have you have a lot of knowledge about that. Do you use any sort of you know, maps of reality, of consciousness? I mean, as you've said, what are ones that seem particularly poignant to you?
Yeah, well, at least if I'm using the maps in a relational space to talk to someone and help understand their experiences, I want to be able to meet them with their own language and in their own system of beliefs.
Wow.
And so if someone's relating to, let's say, Buddhist philosophies, and they experience maybe Bufo as this like great void, and that is what's most meaningful for them, I'm not going to talk about a sort of Abrahamic Godhead and like this emanating source of light. It's more so relating to them in what feels authentic and relatable for their experience.
Interesting.
In the same way of working with folks with any like Muslim background, it's like, again, using different language and really allowing them to put the meaning out first, and then being like, oh, I might have something to contribute that might be helpful in incorporating that for themselves. Certainly in my own view of things, I like to, sometimes one map feels more appropriate than the other. You know, being able to talk about a very particular archetype or something, or a very particular sensation or quality of an experience, even though these different wisdom traditions might be talking about the same thing, they might describe it in slightly different ways, and sometimes that feels more appropriate to describe the sensation, because there's like a feeling with each of them, even though they're still describing the same thing. Yeah,
it's a little different though, right? And so it's depending on the situation. You would use different ones. Yeah, you to me, you're like a true shaman, and like the truest sense of the word, like a modern day shaman. You're literally facilitating these healings through plant medicines and through these different maps of reality. It's outstanding. Like seriously, I'm so impressed by you. Would you consider yourself a shaman? And more than that, what is a shaman to you? What is shamanism?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for thinking so highly of me and the work that I do.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and thank you.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, and certainly I don't think of myself as a shaman. I think the work that I'm doing, a lot of people would describe as shamanic, and certainly the interests and ways of thinking and intervention that I bring into this space is drawing from indigenous wisdom, and I open myself up very humbly to learning the best I can these traditional ways of navigating the world and psyche and creating better harmony in my own and the beings around me in order to create universal harmony. Yeah. I mean, I've been a part of a number of different types of ceremonies and coming from different traditions and draw a lot from those. And like Native American practices certainly are pretty well ingrained into what I'm doing, or at least the way that I'm like praying in my own private life. And I'm using some of those plants like cedar and tobacco in ceremonies at different times to help move or offer up energy to unseen guides and teachers that can help move through the space and help invite the movement and unblocking of energies. As well as drawing a lot from Buddhist and Taoist philosophy too, in the way of like impermanence and being able to move very fluidly with non-attachment to things. So there's a lot of things that I do draw from, and certainly the Amazonian traditions and their reverence and the sovereignty that they place onto different plant teachers and the spirit of those plants in a way to move through the space is endlessly fascinating to me, and something I fully open myself up to, and also humble myself in the way of not having nearly as much knowledge and exposure to all that as I would like. Yeah.
You have a lot of knowledge and exposure than I do, and I'm like so grateful to talk with you. You said sovereignty. I love that word, and in fact, I kind of I created my own system, and I'm getting ready to finish this book I've been writing about it. So I don't want to reveal too much just yet.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's its own map of consciousness. Yeah. So you said that you offer energy up to these unseen guides. What does that mean exactly? So there's beings in like a higher dimension, or are they kind of aliens, or people on DMT talk about entities meeting these other? What is that exactly?
Yeah. Well, right. Again, different cultures have different ways of understanding this. Something Graham Hancock goes into in his book Supernatural is he finds a parallel of thinking that the elves of like European culture and like the dwarves and gnomes and things are the same phenomena that the modern day like alien encounters are, and that's the same phenomena as the entities that folks are seeing in entheogenic experiences and are talked about in like South American and other traditions like that.
Okay. And
that these forces are always moving through and acting on this world or this level of reality. And I don't necessarily like to think of it as higher or lower, because that kind of creates this like hierarchy of a sense of like better or worse.
Okay.
But there's certainly intersecting levels of reality that are constantly playing out. Yeah, so in the same way, you walk into a room, you pick up on the emotional vibe that tangibly, maybe physically, besides maybe like an electronic signal that everyone's sending out through in their like aura.
Right.
There isn't something happening, but we are tuning into that more subtle life force that's happening.
Okay.
And so, with different cultural understandings, there are different beings or different archetypes that have come into the entheogenic space, and there's a way of like working with them. Yeah. So one thing would be in like a lot of different Native American traditions, there's these set of beings, the Thunderbirds, and so there's a particular way to offer like sweetgrass to the Thunderbirds. It's like burning sweetgrass in a way to help bring them into the space. And then there's a particular medicine that they can carry. In the same way to evoking the bear teacher or the feathered teachers, the birds,
Okay.
or a specific bird frequency to come in order to help things out. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. It makes me think of Zapdos, from Pokemon.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thunderbirds.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some parallel there.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is. I know, Pokemon were also, they heavily borrow those ideas from Japanese mythology, I guess you could call it. But so would you say these are purely like metaphorical beings, or on some level they actually exist?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you ask, but some people would say it's as real as you or me. Yeah.
Total, like gnomes and fairies, right, and dragons.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you look at like Hinduism, for example, they have these massive festivals, multi-day festivals, just evoking a single being's name, a single deity's name.
Deity, yeah. Gods.
Yes,
Almost. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And there is trance states that people go into. I mean, in some of these festivals, people will be seen looking as if they're having an exorcism, just like moving their body in relatively uncontrolled ways, with speaking in different tongues.
Wow.
Or oftentimes what's remarkable is people can get into these channeling states, these being able to tune into something greater, or even more so, letting go of the control they have of themselves to allow a different force to come through. And then in that open state, when the being is acting through their physical vessel, there is healing, among other things, that can happen to someone. So after someone's been channeling Shiva, for example, and perhaps even speaking like very fluently Sanskrit as a language they may or may not know well, there's there can be benefits to this, of allowing your body to be used as a vessel for these higher forces. In the same way that a ayahuasca shaman might make space in their own being to allow plant teachers to act through them and move through them in order to help heal the participants in the ceremony.
Wow. So we're talking about like kind of possession, maybe a little bit, or channeling.
It depends on the relationship someone's having with a non-physical force. A possession certainly has a negative connotation to it,
yes.
And that's not to say that there aren't malevolent ways to occupy a physical being.
Which is, I've heard that it's really quite dangerous to open yourself up to these to other entities or other intelligences, because once they have control of your body, they could mess with you in unpredictable ways, in ways that you don't know that what they're doing, to put it bluntly, So I've heard that it's actually dangerous to do that, or is there a certain like safe way to do that, to become to let another entity or spirit into, right?
To tune into a force and let that force move through. The probably safest ways to do so is to find a community or elders who are well versed in this and navigating and have a true authentic connection to whatever archetypal force is wanting to be moved with. Okay. Going back to this, our conversation about alcohol, people in a bar, for example, are opening their consciousness up. They're changing their way of being, and that and alcohol is generally considered a lower vibrational thing, so you can use it to go into like the weeds of something.
Okay.
But as people have a less concise control of their own being and their energy field, that does allow for other things to move through. And so oftentimes when people are continually drinking, that intensifies these negative patterns. And so if there's a entity with a negative agenda moving through someone, it has a vested interest in keeping someone engaged in maladaptive patterns like drinking, like being like using their sexual energy in not good ways
and
and
destructive.
in other destructive behaviors like that.
Right.
And so there's a sense that that friction that's created, that suffering that's created in the individual is in fact charge or life force that being can feed off of and sort of gain either more control or at least have a feed of energy. And oftentimes, again, depending on the worldview and the tradition you're coming from, individuals have many of these attachments, ranging from more minor to more major, depending on the severity of what's going on. And especially if you're starting to go into transpersonal realms and thinking about ancestral lines, there could be like quote unquote like an ancestral curse or like a pattern that's been deep in someone's ancestry, which has been perpetuated by these unseen and subtle forces.
So that's what people mean when they talk about healing ancestral traumas, right? You know. So yeah, just another interesting kind of thing to me is that, you know, so that would be considered more of like a lower vibrational entity or force, as opposed to a higher vibrational, right? So does that, so not to say that one is better or worse. It's not about, you know, like, oh, lower vibrational is bad. But in the way, you mentioned something about you don't want to do like you don't want to put it into like a hierarchical kind of frame of mind. But in the way these terms are used to describe a lot of these phenomena of like lower vibrational being like evil or something, you know, and higher vibrational being like angels or something, right? So yeah, again, it's just interesting to me that there does seem to be some sort of not that one is better than the other. You need the full spectrum.
Yeah, but a light and a dark, juxtaposing sort of forces.
That creates a contrast, right? That creates definition almost, right, for us. Okay, great.
Yeah, and if you're talking about allowing yourself to open up to light beings that are wanting the betterment of one's own evolution and the greater harmony of the web of life, these are, of course, this can look in a lot of different ways, but the energy signature of these beings is just different.
The energy signature. Totally.
There's much more movement towards good things. There's much more wanting someone to be in their own power, wanting folks to be able to heal and be selflessly in service to the healing of others. This service to self. Yeah. And I think this gentleman, Bernhard Guentner, and his wife, Laura Matsu, they have a website, veilofreality.com. It is incredibly helpful for information around this.
Interesting.
They really go in depth as to what all this navigation can look like in the way of these forces.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like I got a lot of links to put in the description. No, it's great. Definitely send me those. I'll have to check them out. Yeah, you know, because for me, sometimes when I'm in a certain state of mind, like actually like a higher vibrational thing seems like annoying or like it's like too much right now. You know what I mean? And likewise, you know, so I think, so I guess maybe this is like my own thing. Maybe I'm cynical, you know, but it seems to me like a lot of times entities will present themselves a certain way, just to kind of get through the door, so to speak. And then it'll turn out that they're actually maybe the opposite or something. Yes. Their intentions aren't what they presented themselves as first. Even in the Bible, there's something about, you know, Jesus said that at one point where he said, the devil will sometimes pretend to be me when he's approaching you. You know, he'll pretend to be Jesus, you know. So just that's always kind of stuck with me as just like I don't necessarily want to let other forces into my body at all if I can prevent it. You know what I mean? Where I think that the way to do it is to just be connected to the source.
Exactly.
If you're connected to the source, which is the light, we were talking about before, if you have that light shine through you really don't need assistance. You don't need external forces at all, really. Like, we're already self-contained. We're already perfect the way we are, right? That's something that so it can be scary, I think, to walk into these shamanic experiences. For me, at least, I've never done ayahuasca. I think it's definitely in the cards. I think I really want to try it out, because I don't know, everyone's talking about it, right? Must be something to it, right?
Yeah.
But you got to try everything once, kind of thing. But I know for myself, I feel as though I will be going into it with some sort of my own defenses, which can either make it better or worse, I would imagine, the experience, right? Because so this is, I guess, I just can't wrap my mind around, like, what's the right state of mind to approach these things, like total openness, or a certain ego to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and it's a really important thing to explore for anyone going into these group ceremonies, because you are opening yourself up in a very profound way with a lot of other people doing so at the same time.
Right.
And so a lot of those people too, if they're moving through and helping purge and clear out dense patterns,
some
or
stuff
beings.
Might come out, right?
Exactly. And so there's this balance between, I'm open to my own experiences and what that is going to look like, while not getting entirely drunk on the love that can be that can be permeating this space too.
Right.
Yeah, because if we are all the more losing ourselves in that experience, we can become maybe disoriented. And at the same time too, it's like then recognizing the true, real frequency of love and allowing that to permeate your whole being. Yeah.
Maintaining like a certain level of non-judgmental mentality, maybe, in a sense, right? So so tell me a bit about, like, what's the most interesting experience maybe that you've had facilitating these kind of group sessions, or like what's an interesting experience you had that you could tell us about?
Well, something that's really remarkable is after like a group mushroom experience, for example, when we are debriefing and touching base in our sharing circle at the end, oftentimes at a particular moment, people will be able to talk about that same moment and have very similar internal experiences. So I might have a story like, oh, well, I was feeling this emotion in the room and I wasn't sure exactly if this was my own story or what, to like be dealing with a particular trauma or something. And then for other people to report back at that same time having had a similar experience. Like there's one experience where it was just me and one other person, and we were working with mushrooms, and we had we reported back the same. I started a story and she was able to finish the other part of the story because we were delivered onto watching the same entity, it was like the same cultural symbolism of like being very circus-like, very red and gold, a lot of like Chinese lattice, and we described the being in a very particular way.
Wow. Being
connected to a particularly like type of heinous action and perpetuating that in humans. And yes, so I was able to start it and she was able to finish it. And it's like, to me, that was absolutely confirmation that we were tuning into the same witnessing, the same witnessing of a phenomenon.
That is incredible.
Yeah. Very affirming, yeah.
Right. I'm sure that's very healing too, because it's not, we're not just making it up. It's not just, like something that isn't real on some level, like these vibrations, like we are part of the same world, and we are kind of having these shared experiences. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's wow, it's incredible. So yeah, I mean, again, like, I guess, like, backtracking a bit, we really got into some good stuff. This is an amazing conversation, I gotta say.
I'm enjoying myself. Yeah.
I want to know how you got into this. I think it would be very interesting for people from different backgrounds to kind of understand where all of this is coming from, and like how did, like what inspired you, and what were maybe early life influences that led you into this path that you're in.
Sure, yeah. Well, I can start when I was about 16 or so, maybe 15. I had, it was the first summer I started smoking pot. Yeah. And
I was 16 also.
Yeah. And I had a very materialist view of the world. It was like the religions only tear people apart. They only do harm. I can witness all of these incredibly judgmental patterns that are perpetuated in people through religion. I'm very closed off to it. I had smoked with two good friends of mine, and it was like the very end of the summer, and we were looking up into the night sky, outside, laying on grass, and I remember my awareness just going up into like the stars, the cosmos, and feeling my being expand to unimaginable proportions. And I was just in that space, feeling as if the stars and solar systems were my body, and then coming back into my own body.
Whoa.
And like, okay, I have, that felt incredibly real and incredibly true. I have some considering to do. And so as I began to open myself up with exploring mushrooms and really coming to understand that there was very subtle influences that were happening during those experiences, picking up on my own life force, picking up on group dynamics, as well as tuning into nature and the deep communication that could occur between me and the group and nature. It really set me off on a path of, well, first I had pursued art because I was like, I want to be able to share these experiences with other people.
Amazing.
And use that as a vehicle to help liberate other people in their own awareness and consciousness.
Totally. Art is great for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Look the big camera.
From there, I began to change my scope, and I pursued expressive therapy because I found so much healing in my own use of the art and creative process. And then I went into holistic psychology, and so I was pursuing counseling.
Okay.
And
oh wow.
Yeah, and so throughout college, I was working with psychedelics, oftentimes solo, but also with groups of people, or like in myself. I wasn't facilitating by any means, but having those experiences and becoming very interested in ceremony. And I continued with the counseling work, working in a number of psychiatric institutions, as well as group homes, working with folks with traumatic brain injury, end-of-life work, addiction, a lot of different settings, and being very grateful to see those things.
Yeah.
And I began to get involved through an ayahuasca community, some Bufo ceremonies. And so I was able to work with a really trained facilitator for quite some time, and that opened me up to a whole network of people in the plant medicine world, and being able to then accept other teachers into my life. I got involved with a lot of Native American ceremonies, and I spent time down in the Sonoran Desert with the Seri Comcac tribe, and got to spend a little time with them, and which is the home of the Bufo toad, which is certainly my chosen sacrament.
When you say a little time, like how long was it?
Oh, about 10 days or so.
10 days?
Yeah.
Where's this desert?
The Sonoran Desert is the northwest region of Mexico. So it's close to... the Sonora is a state in Mexico, and so it's towards the coast, but this area expands a fair distance.
It must have been a beautiful experience to spend with the tribe there. Well,
Truly. They had a really deep understanding of this medicine, and during the ceremonies I had down there, one after the other, I was like, this is the most profound journey I've had in my entire life, like up until this moment. But there really is this incredibly old connection that just seemed like this one woman, Philomena, I remember her singing, and I felt as if her DNA and bones was just singing these ancient songs. It's in this Comcac language that's a very unique language, but feeling the frequency of it and just knowing in my whole being what was being done.
So you could almost understand that language.
On a frequency level, yeah. Just to recognize that it was moving through and pervading my whole, not just physical body, but on a very much deeper level, yeah. Yeah, so very, very grateful for all of the teachers and opportunities I've had. After my first Bufo experience, I thought it would be a decade until I'd start holding space. I was like, I have so much cleaning out to do, I have so much stuff to do, and it was really through happenstance, and not so much pursuing it, that I was able to come into having these unique positions, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds it sounds like a very kind of sacred path to take on. I mean, it seems in ways you were kind of led into this, but like a calling that you have, this calling to work with these plant medicines. I can almost positively say that's not something I probably could ever do, because I just feel like that's so much to take on. You have to have kind of like such a purity to yourself. You have to have, like you said, cleared stuff out in order to continually, go into those states, into those, I guess you could say, psychedelic or higher vibrational states, and especially then holding space for others to, facilitate their healing. It just sounds like such a great service that you're doing, for all of us, for humanity. And I guess, is that something, like, what's your mindset around that, if that makes sense? Like, what's your mindset around, for me, like, I had maybe a trip here and there, maybe I was in the desert, I did some mushrooms, and I had a profound experience, and like I still remember it, and it's still inspiring, like my poems and my art to this day, But to go into that again and again, I don't know if I could handle that, you know?
Right. And it's not necessarily the thing to do again and again.
Yeah.
I think we are one of many in that there's a whole line of ancestors behind us, and I think every individual has the ability to be a healer, and that looks like a lot of different ways. I think that each person has their own dharma, their own way of showing up into the world in a very authentic way that is in service to those around them, and that can look very different for everyone in each particular lifetime. And so in the way of anyone who's wanting to perhaps pursue this sort of work and has a mindset of like, oh, well, I feel like I may never be able to do so, it's like, oh, well, there's just investing that you need to do into yourself to make that possible and to make that reality move towards you. And I'm sure that you've held space incredibly for other people at various points in their lives in your own novel and authentic way. And yeah, there's a remembering that can occur when we realize who and what we are, how much in service we can be to the long line of hearts before this one, our ancestors. And when we open ourselves up to their influence, I think that truly incredible things can move through us, and that our reality can really change, and that especially for like the maybe last of our generation, or we just know in ourselves that we are here to help heal others and be in service, that we ought to pursue opportunities where we can be in apprenticeship and where we can truly humble ourselves and do the internal work necessary in order to hold space for other people, which means really holding ourselves incredibly accountable and doing a lot of navel gazing and a lot of work through therapy and other interventions in order to make ourselves as a clear as possible vessel for these forces to move through, and for the energies permeating from an individual that we're in service to move through without having our own stories, projections, and densities get caught up in.
Are you all hearing this? This is amazing. You're a saint. I'm not just trying to like boost your ego or anything like that. Like, it's just so much light coming from you. That's amazing that you're able to just speak so well on these things. I'm very, very impressed. I think this is probably going to be my longest podcast. I might even have to break it up into two. I guess, nearing the end, nearing, kind of starting to, what is it called? Coming down from the trip.
Sure. Yeah. Time to eat some food, huh?
Yeah. Lunchtime pretty soon. Yes. So, what is it that you've been doing recently? And I know you've been holding some spaces with like music and dancing and stuff like that, right? And what do you have going on these days, and like where you feel like you're called to do next? And just in general, like how can people reach you, and how can if someone has any questions for you, like how can they get to you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for letting me talk about how folks can reach me, what I've been up to, and thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed this, and look forward to everything down the line, whatever that looks like with both of us.
Totally. We will be in contact 100%.
Yeah, so recently I've been helping host sound baths or sound journeys with my incredible partner Morgan Malsum and a really close friend of ours, Willow Child. And so these are sound baths using Himalayan bowls, crystal bowls, guitar, tongue drums, rattles, frame drums, a lot of different instruments. And last night we used like water as a part of it. We were like dripping water and using the water as a drum at points.
Wow.
And really allowing folks to experience sacred space in a community container that isn't dependent on entheogens, that is something that folks can come to and experience whatever they need to, but a lot of people will report having quite expansive experiences and even some visionary states coming on, which is certainly more of a remark about their own capacity and what is possible when any sort of sacred container is held, and just what each individual can get up to. And so through that platform, we are Sound Sanctuary. We can be reached on Instagram at Sound Sanctuary MKE Milwaukee, or on Facebook, Sound Sanctuary. And that has been a great passion. I have been getting up to a lot more song circles recently, and my partner Morgan is an incredible song carrier. And so we've been able to get involved with some really special communities and sharing song, and we hope to eventually help lead those song circles. I can be reached at Inner Wellspring on Instagram, or by email, toadmedicinehealing@protonmail.com. Those are great ways to get a hold of me. I have been making ceremonial fans, like smudging fans using different feathers, using animal furs, as well as other like special and sacred woods, which is an incredibly fun thing.
I did want to ask you about that, actually. Yeah,
sure.
like what is that? What is that exactly? Smudging fans?
Yeah, well, fans can be used in a number of ways. So basically every indigenous culture is using the plants and animals around them as and recognizing the potential for them to be tools. And every animal carries with it particular medicine, that some would say. So each species of bird has a particular way of moving through the world, and those ways of being in the world, those characteristics, those wisdoms that they carry, if they're mindfully and reverently constructed into a single device, a fan, that can help move those energies inherent in that particular type of bird or animal or plant through that device, the fan, into the space. And so it's more so like ceremonial instruments opposed to smudging fans. You can use them to smudge. I mean, there's a lot of torque behind them.
Okay.
But yeah.
But if it's really hot or something? Or?
Sure, yeah. If it's hot, the turkeys might help you out.
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Course,
but just interesting.
Yeah.
How Native Americans, I've heard that they use like every part of the body, right? When they, like, it's like
sure, yeah,
something like that.
Like leave nothing behind. There's I mean, just about every indigenous culture is going to use incredibly inventive ways to utilize different parts of animals. And
Okay.
Yeah, like in Peruvian Andean shamanism, for example, the fan can be used almost as if it is like a knife or a sword. So like the wing feathers they look blade-like. There's a small edge, a very thin edge on one side, and then which helps cut through the air, and then a larger, broader set of feathers, I suppose, on the other side, which helps give lift when the animal beats its wing down. So you have one side that's cutting through, the other that's giving lift. And so using wing feathers, at least according to Andean shamanism, is something in which it's as if it is razor sharp on a spiritual realm if wielded correctly, and can help cut through density or sever cords or do whatever it needs to do on those more subtle levels.
Wow. So cool. Amazing.
I'm constantly in awe of the birds. I can tell one quick story about the birds.
Please do.
Yeah,
please.
So after I constructed my first fan, a few days later, I had a just personal mushroom experience, and I was laying with the fan on my chest, and there was multiple times in the evening where I kind of went into this bird realm. And so the first 2 times I went into it, it's all of the visual imagery were like beaks and talons and like hawk eyes and things.
Whoa.
And it was in a very jagged, sharp way, very kaleidoscopic, a lot of like repetitive, incredibly beautiful, but a lot of but also very like alarming. It felt quite unsafe. It felt like, oh, this is true wildness. This is the fierceness of an eagle's eye. This is the sharpness of a talon.
Yeah.
And so I entered that space a couple of times, and eventually I was in that space again, and then it just lit up, and there is all these beautiful mandalas of like softer birds, of like blue macaw, yellow and gold macaw, all of these very sweet pheasant energy and turkey energy, and this sensation of flight and expansiveness and sensation of being in a nest and having the precious life of eggs. And so my understanding of that, my interpretation of that was that there are these guardians, these gatekeepers of all of these animal realms. And in first approaching it, it is the meeting of those guardians, and to see if I'm sincere or not in working with that particular animal spirit in that animal realm. And eventually, if they decide whether one can enter or not, and then I was rewarded with a lot more pleasant energy and allowing those different wisdoms to come through. And
They let you in, huh?
I hope so. Yeah, and I have to be on my best behavior and to really let them know that I'm sincere, because I'm sure they'll kick me out just like that.
Yeah. It was amazing, of like a vision, right, of like that world.
True, yeah.
That avian world, I think it is, right? That's amazing. So such a beautiful soul that you are. Thank you so much for being on. And if we could just maybe do one more of the sound things just to close it off.
Yeah, sounds great.
So it's like a sound bath, right? I like that word a lot. I like bathing in sound.
A nice scrub. Yeah. I'll name as well. I work with integration counseling, and I'm open to working with new clients at this time for folks who are either preparing for entheogenic experiences or wanting to make sense in helping integrate an experience itself, or just challenging content that's coming up afterwards. And I tend to work somatically, that is relating our awareness and tuning that into the body and the very valuable information that our body's giving us, and working with sort of a nervous system based approach, I think, is incredibly helpful for all this.
You're my go-to for that stuff now.
Thank you.
For sure. I will sponsor you. I mean, I'll advertise you for sure. Tell everyone about you, man. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it really feels like a natural extension of the work I was doing before as a traditional counselor, and being able to do it in a much more deeply rewarding space when people are in these journeys to really sincerely pursue self-healing. I think it's an incredible thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much, Dimitri.
Of course.
you made it to the end, you get a gold star. Seriously, thank you so much. You are supporting what I am doing here just by listening, and I appreciate that a whole lot. Ever since I can remember, and it feels like forever, I have been fascinated with what all this is. Being, life, and the nature of reality in general. It is now my hope to traverse these different facets and expand consciousness together with you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being here. If you find that you enjoy listening, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and/or comment, as it shows the algorithm what I'm doing here is truly worthwhile and helps me reach more people. And if for any reason you wish to reach out, I am on Instagram at Dimitri Make Love. That's DimitryMakeLove. Have an amazing day. Remember, all is one. IO. And until next time.